Morning folks, Kevin here. Well, it's July 7th, 2018. I'm up in the second food forest area and up by the compost pile. Today's video is basically a double header. I'm going to respond to a couple of comments and questions regarding the composting system. And the other part of the video is going to be some turning of the pile and a little bit of an update on the pile as well. Start off with the comments and questions. So Mars Rover had commented when I posted the last video on the large composting system. He had just mentioned, geez, he prefers seeing the actual turning of the pile as opposed to the drone footage that I had done overhead looking at the pile. So you're in luck today, Mars Rover. I'm going to show some GoPro footage. It took me 4 hours to turn this pile yesterday. But it's time-lapsed and I'll put some music to it as well. So that takes care of Mars Rover's comment. Surprised that people are actually interested in watching the time-lapse video of seeing the pile being turned. But I would mention that the reason that I do that is so that you can see the approach that I have when I'm turning the pile. I'll go around the circumference of the pile and try to peel off the outer edge of the pile so that that gets incorporated into the center. So I'm trying to take the outside of the pile and put it into the inside of the pile. It's really challenging in this location with this size of pile. I enjoy large pile composting because I can get it all done at one time, but 4 hours is a bit much time to turn a pile, especially with my front end loader. Thank God I didn't have to use the mini excavator, Bumblebee, this time, because that even takes longer. Now get to another question. Benjamin, he also mentioned in the last video that he does large pile composting similar to this size. And he was wondering, do I screen the material when the pile is completed its composting? In other words, when the temperature isn't getting up to 130 degrees, it's staying at about 120 or 110 degrees. Still microbial activity, but it's basically done. And no, I don't actually screen the pile. That'd be an extra step, and I look at screening it as taking that larger particulate matter out of their organic material that I look at as being a necessary prebiotic or food source for the microbes that are going into the garden systems as well. In 1 year's time, all of this stuff will be just perfect looking compost, you know, beautiful, as you've seen in some of the videos when I'm doing the bed prep and I run the rotary harrow or the power harrow over the garden beds or use the garden tilther. I mean, it's just a perfect bed. When I run the cedar, the Jang cedar down it, it just turns out beautifully. But when I first put it into the bed the first season, there are the chunks, and as you'll see in some of the videos, I'm also tossing out some rocks because rocks get in this where I get, or there's bale twine. And a big part of what I have to do is every single time take rocks and sticks. I'm talking about something bigger than the diameter of my thumb out. And you'll see sometimes there's some stuff that looks like sticks and it's just some of the plant material that hasn't broken down. And some of, for example, the corn stalks or some of the weed stems, they take a while to break down. But again, I look at that fibrous material as being a good food source for the microbes in the environment, especially the fungi as well. So, Benjamin had mentioned he uses a lot of wood chips. Now, I'm not currently using wood chips in the composting system that I'm doing. Have I composted, have I used wood chips in composting systems? I have. When I've done that, what I do is I take the wood chips and I treat it like most people would say they're composting it, putting it in a pile and turning it regularly. I turn the compost pile when it hits about 140 degrees. I'm talking about the wood chips when I'm doing it. And I do that, but it takes so long for those wood chips to really break down because there isn't a lot of nitrogen in most of the wood chips, unless you're really getting a lot of the green stuff and lots of the small stems and all. But I've gotten to the point where I'm using the wood chips at such a high rate here on the property that I don't have the time, and it's an unnecessary step for me to go ahead and do the composting. But certainly there are many people that do the composting of wood chips and incorporating that into their composting system, and I think that's fine. And it's often used in some permaculture settings for heating hot water as well and all. For me, what I'm trying to do is build lots of soil as quickly as I can. So another way, if I wanted to build soil quickly, one of the things I discovered, and let me see if I can walk over here for a second. Bear with me, I wasn't planning on walking over here. So right now I'm walking over to the area that's now tarped. So there's a tarp there, that's all wood chips in between. There's where the blue potatoes and some of the squash or pumpkins are planted over there. And the area where I'm standing right now is a place where wood chips got dropped as well. And the compost is over there. And when I would take these wood chips and all, and I had extra compost, I ended up getting it initially accidentally mixed in together, the wood chips and compost, about where I'm standing right now. And I was surprised at how rapidly those wood chips would turn into a better soil decomposition. It isn't really composting because they didn't get up to, the thermophilic temperature ranges. We weren't above 135 to 165 degrees. We weren't in those ranges, but my hypothesis is that the wood chips, as the small pieces of wood chips, small in circumference around the diameter, that's the little twigs and sticks and small pieces of wood, would get coated with the composting materials, and it would be spread up here in a more foresty area, because right here is a forest right behind me. The wood chips would, in a sense, get inoculated and break down much more quickly, and it created a really nice soil mixture. And I've used that stuff over in the hugelkultur terrace area. So that's my 2 cents on wood chips and all, but no, Benjamin, I'm not screening it. It's for our own use. I'm not selling this material, and it's real handy. I think it's fantastic having the larger particles admixed in with the compost itself. So just a quick update now on the compost. So I can't remember when I posted the last video, but you can look at the date that I posted the last video on the compost pile, that I shot the drone footage, and I'll put a link in the upper right hand corner to that video. But I explained in that video that this compost pile is a combination of material that was overwintered last year with lots of wet leaves and material that was down in a wetter part of the property. And I transported it up here, and that I needed to break it up with the excavator because it was so saturated, and mix it with the drier hay and horse bedding material that came with the manure in the more recent compost. But even the composting materials that I used that came from Purpose Farm this season, well, that was being gathered since last fall. So I mixed all those materials as best as I could using the excavator and the front end loader, and created that pile. And so I've watched the temperatures since last week, whenever I did posted that video, and it took a few days for it to get up into the 130s. some of the areas. Some areas got right up into the 140s within a couple of days time. Now the temperatures right now, I just checked them, are about 125 degrees in the two places. Now checking a pile like this with those 3-foot thermometers that we have, well, it can take all day, because I'll keep coming up every couple of hours and move the thermometers around in this pile. As you can imagine, it takes quite a few spots to really get an idea of where the temperatures are at. And the temperatures got up for at least several days up above 135 degrees in most areas. And it was above 155 degrees, but didn't hit 160 in other areas. And because I had those wet areas, and we did have one downpour, and there is a lower spot right over here about where I'm pointing, where there was a little pool of water still setting there, because this is such humusy material. The compost down here, even the soil that's made up below this, it just held that water very, very well. So I was concerned, geez, are we going to have an anaerobic spot down here in the base of this? It's time to turn it. So I turned it earlier than I normally would have if we had not had, let me phrase it this way, if we had not had that rain and that water setting there, I would have been inclined to wait maybe a couple more days till our temperatures are definitely up there and we hit about 160, which gives me a little buffer zone before we hit the 165 where we go anaerobic. But because of those reasons, I decided to go ahead and turn it yesterday. And there were no anaerobic smells. That was good. Lots of evidence of actinobacter all throughout the process. But there were some cooler spots in the pile and wetter spots. But they didn't have that smell that I would be concerned about. So I was pretty happy with how it got mixed up. I did end up, after peeling around the outside, going ahead and going back when I got to those spots that were cooler, taking some of the material where I knew it had been more effective at reaching higher temperatures, and mix that in with those spots that were cooler as well. So without belaboring this topic anymore and spending more time talking about it, I think what I'll do now is end the video with the GoPro footage with a little bit of audio. There was, I'm going to edit out the parts where I'm pulling out a lot of the bale twine. Lots and lots of bale twine, a few rocks in there yesterday. But otherwise, the whole process went pretty well. Just 4 hours is a long time to take to turn a pile this size and all. So if this video is of interest to you, please give it a thumbs up. Be sure to ask questions, leave comments. I'm really interested in what people think about, are they doing larger composting? Are you interested in getting more input about composting as well? Really depends on what you want as far as composting goes. I'm a little surprised that people actually want to see the turning of the compost at this point, but I'm delighted to show you because yesterday I set up the GoPro and got some footage. So if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Hit the bell icon if you want to be notified. Share it with your friends. And by all means, folks, have a fantastic day. Bye-bye now.